I know, I like weird things.
Good morning. Madam Secretary, please go ahead.
Good morning. We will open the meeting by calling the roll call. Superintendent Degenfelder.
Present.
Treasurer Meyer. Auditor Racinas. Secretary Gray.
Here.
Governor Gordon.
Here?
We have Senator Pappas.
Here.
Senator Driscoll.
Excused?
And Representative Nicholas.
Excused?
And I don't believe Representative Walters will be here today.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman, next item is approval of the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Been seconded by the auditor. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. The agenda is approved.
Next item is approval of the meeting minutes. And I would note that different from your print copy in your book, the digital copy has been updated and there's a revised printed page 1 on the desk in front of you, maybe at the bottom of the handouts, that adds Senator Driscoll to the attendance list.
Thank you. Is there any further comments or adjustments, corrections to the minutes? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, move to approve the minutes from October 9th, 2024.
Then,
As amended.
as
For the
amended,
updated version.
is that a second, Mr. Treasurer? It is a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, next item on the agenda includes 2 action items. Item 2 is the State Building Commission rules. You will also note that there is a handout for item 2. It's 1 page.
Thank you, madam.
At this meeting, SBC will consider the comments and vote whether to adopt the rules. The State Building Commission has proposed changes to chapters 1, 4, and 6 of its rules to permit concealed carry of firearms in public areas of the Capitol building and Capitol extension. The rules have gone through an extensive stakeholder review process, including a preliminary public hearing on August 12th, 2024. The formal public comment period began on October 31st, 2024, and ended on December 16th, 2024. The notice of rulemaking was published in the Casper Star Tribune and the Wyoming Tribune Eagle. Overall, the commission received 56 comments, 36 commenters oppose the rule changes, and 20 commenters support the rule changes. The 20 comments in favor include 14 that do not believe the change goes far enough. At this time, in consideration of the public comments, the commission may determine that no amendments to the rule are necessary, the proposed rules. However, in response to the public comments, the commission is beginning the process of considering rule changes for all other executive office spaces. There are a pretty expansive number of attachments within the section of the meeting information packet. The comments begin on page 25 of the meeting packet. The proposed motions to approve, disapprove, or modify the proposed SBC rule revisions are on page 10. And so if we have any discussion about the commissions.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. First, let me commend the work of Auditor Racinas and Superintendent Degenfelder putting these rules together. Thank you for your diligence. What is the pleasure of the board as we go forward here?
I have a couple questions.
Let me recognize the auditor, and then I'll come back to you.
That's okay, he can,
Okay,
yeah, because I may be able to answer some of them.
all right. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask you, because it has been weakened considerably, this rule, what the feedback was that it doesn't go far enough. You said it was 20, I think, that said that?
Mr. Chairman, Secretary Gray, it was 14 of the 20 comments that in their comment where they may have cited statute or the Constitution, where they also said it should be allowed anywhere all the time or something to that effect.
Okay, now, 14 of the 20?
Yes.
Of 20 of what?
20 of the comments that commented in support of the changes to the rules.
Oh, wow. So 14 of the 20 said that it didn't go far enough. Interesting.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to provide a little bit of background of kind of how we're here. So these final rules are the same rules that we approved this board as draft rules at the previous meeting. This covers the Capitol complex. We do not, and so this is amending those rules that were currently in place. And correct me, Madam Secretary, if I've gotten any of this incorrect. Looking now at, which I believe these comments are really based on, looking now at office building space, Herschler Building, another state-owned office building, we do not currently have rules in place to amend. And so we have already, Auditor Racinas and I, through the working group, have already worked with the AG's office, and they are currently drafting rules to bring to us that cover those additional buildings. And so a little bit of a nuance there of the fact that we don't have rules in place yet. Those need to be drafted from scratch regarding the other office buildings. So this is a great first step. I think we're, as a rules committee, continuing to move forward in that next step. And I would turn to the auditor if she has any additional comments.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and the group has gotten together and as the superintendent said, directed the AG's office to draft us a package of rules. And I think as opposed to looking at any exceptions first and then trying to craft rules around those, we are going to have a basic set of rules for all buildings and all agencies that would not need an exception. So we're going to go to essentially look at the standard for a, I don't want to say normal, but sort of a less sensitive agency like mine, for example, and then go from there if there does need to be any carve-outs, particularly some of those agencies that were carved out in 125 from last year. So that's our plan. We're moving forward with it. Just received information from A&I. Thank you, on a complete list of agencies and buildings that we can then assess.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm not understanding why the Herschler, I mean, it's part of the Capitol complex. So when we say that this has been done for the Capitol complex, but not including the Hirschler, I just think that's really interesting. And, you know, what's the response to that?
Mr. Chairman, I think the issue with including the Hirschler now is we don't have any personnel rules at all to capture what that would look like for employees. So if you blanketed this set of rules that we will vote on today, essentially that would allow the public to carry in the Hirschler building, but not employees. So I don't, that's what, if we, for example, added the Hirschler building or any other building into that set of rules today, it would only impact members of the public and would not change the ability of employees to carry or not.
Mr. Chairman, can you point out that provision in the rules that says employees couldn't carry if we added in the Hirschler?
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That provision is covered under an executive order under Governor Geringer. And so thus that has been in place and there have not been any personnel rules. So we're starting from scratch when it comes to personnel rules regarding state employees.
And Mr. Chairman, we've covered this. My memory's coming back. Rules supersede EOs, and that's a basic understanding of law. Rules and procedures, you know, supersede EOs. So if it's allowed in the rule, it's clearly allowed. And so I reject that, and I think it's false.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wonder if we could have some direction from the AG's office on that. That I think would be helpful because my understanding has been to the contrary.
Is there anyone from the AG's office here? There. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I am Tabitha Wolf. I am with the Attorney General's office. And I will start out with, I am about as low in the Attorney General's office as you can get. So if Ms. Hill or any of my supervisors say to the contrary, I will make sure to update the board. So the executive order specifically applies to employees. And so that is a very specific rule that only applies to employees when they are at their workplace. The rules are more broadly applicable, and they only apply to the public areas of the Capitol building and the Herschel building. And that is, at this point in time, because of some potential conflicts with statute that we want to make sure are clarified prior to implementing broader rules in office spaces, in addition to making sure that the personnel rules are in place. So at this time, because the executive order is more specific, it can still apply to the employees. And so the intent, I believe, at the time that we put together these rules and working with the rules working group was that the executive order would remain in place until personnel rules were developed to supersede it specifically.
And Mr. Chairman, and keep in mind here that the Attorney General does work at the pleasure of the governor, and so I do think it affects the analysis. But you're saying that even if employees were specifically called out in a rule and statute lays out that specifically amortizes that this board can issue procedures in executive buildings pursuant to its rulemaking authority, that an EO, when it's in conflict, would win out?
No. So the way that these particular rules were drafted, and the intent was not to conflict with or supersede that executive order at this time. And again, the personnel rules are covered elsewhere. typically the State Building Commission, while it does have some limited authority to make personnel rules, the State Building Commission makes rules for the use of buildings, but not specifically employment policies. And so the intent is to work appropriately through the process of making those personnel rules in addition to the rules for the buildings.
So the next question, Mr. Chairman, is if the rules were to be in conflict with the EO, and this happens all the time. I mean, statutes are in conflict with rules and statutes win out. Rules are in conflict with agency determinations, memos, and the rules win out. And so my feeling, and I've asserted this from, many times, and the members of this board have tried to, counter this, and I don't think it is legally accurate. I think it's an attempt to build an excuse. But if they conflicted, would a rule win out over an EO, in your opinion?
Generally speaking, yes. If
Okay.
they're in direct
Thank you.
conflict, the rule can supersede the executive order, statute can supersede a rule. And again, the intent with the drafting here was not to supersede that executive order at this time, but to work through the personnel rules appropriately, at least was my understanding.
Mr. Chairman,
Madam Superintendent.
so I'm a little bit confused now. So the personnel rules versus these rules for the actual building. Okay, can you walk me through this? Because again, my understanding was that this was not the appropriate place to do this, and that these two separate rules, and we were gonna, because I think I speak for the working group that we want to move forward with this in the Hirschler and the buildings, but that the process, this was not the place for it, and we needed to have separate rules.
Correct. And so the rules, so the rules generally apply to the limited public areas of the Capitol building and the Capitol Annex, but not the Hirschler building. They also don't apply to the office spaces. And specifically, because of the provision in the statute prohibiting the carrying of any meeting of government entities. So that makes it significantly more complicated to ensure that if we were to move into office spaces, that we don't violate that statute inadvertently. So the personnel rules at this time through the executive order are not intended to conflict with these rules because of the limited area in which you can carry, and because the executive order is more specific to employees only. So personnel policies can be different than the rules. The personnel policies are a term of your employment as opposed to a condition of use of the building.
Mr. Chairman, follow up?
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So these rules that we have before us today are not rules that are governing the Hirschler building, because I think that's the confusion of the Capitol complex versus, and so maybe I misspoke of Capitol complex. What exactly are we talking about here that these rules govern, and do they not govern the Hirschler building?
So they specifically apply to the Capitol building and the Capitol extension. So that is the area, and it doesn't apply to all areas in the Capitol building and Capitol extension. So it specifically applies to the public areas. And that is intended to ensure that we don't inadvertently violate the prohibition on carrying in government meeting spaces.
Do you have a follow-up? Mr. Treasurer.
So there was, I think, some ambiguity about whether or not the auditorium was actually covered. Can you tell us whether this particular set of rules that are coming forward does or does not have this auditorium in it?
Mr. Chairman, Treasurer Meyer, The auditorium is not included because in this
That's what I
room,
thought.
we have governmental meetings,
Yeah.
which is prohibited by statute at this time.
And I guess a clarification as far as personnel rules. I think what you're trying to do is have some uniformity rather than having a different set of rules in every building, every town. And that's why that you're trying to get something that's more uniform. Now, I guess the question is, and I think I know the answer, but I want to be clear, that this particular committee doesn't have the authority to do uniform personnel rules.
Chairman and Mr. Treasurer, that would be correct. We have some, or the board has some authority to pass rules that impact personnel, and that is because of their ability to regulate the actual facilities. But there is other entities within the state that manage and regulate employees more specifically. And so as part of this process, we would be working with those other agencies to ensure that all of the personnel is either incorporated into the personnel rules and policies, or that the rules that we put in place here have personnel consequences for the violation. So,
But it does appear that we do have the authority to regulate who carries a firearm in any of the buildings, because they are the buildings that are under our control, and that'd be separate apart from personnel rules. And we do have a conflict right now with an executive order, but that conflict, I guess, was waived in the aspect of the Capitol and the connector.
Mr. Chairman, Secretary, that would be correct. So the intent here was to do the personnel at a later time in order to make sure that while this board regulates the buildings and can therefore say who and when people can bring firearms into state-owned buildings, there are also personnel consequences for violations. So if an employee brings in a firearm and there's an accidental discharge, having some personnel consequences for that would be done through a different agency. And they can simply say, if you violate other rules, that is a personnel violation as well.
So, but we are regulating personnel, but they're security personnel, highway patrol people that have that training. And that the board is doing that, saying that they can carry.
Yes, that is correct, Mr. Treasurer.
Okay, well, but I would assume that what the working group is working on is something that actually addresses that point for the Hirschler building and other buildings. And now I want to make certain that they're just not wasting their time, moving forward, because I think we all want to, try to have some uniformity. And I think this is as good a place as any to have the uniformity within our buildings. But it would be nice to know that the decisions we make doesn't put our state employees at a risk of not being covered by the liability insurance in the programs that we have to cover those risks. So that clarification, I think, would be good going forward, so we know that we're not digging ourselves in a hole. Thank you.
Auditor.
Mr. Chairman, just a couple other thoughts. The treasurer reminded me of something important. I think it is the fair thing to do to move through this with employees in an equitable manner so that one employee in the Hirschler building gets to do something that across the street in the Pioneer building you don't get to. You know, that may even work for the same agency that has different locations or somebody, you know. The other thing I would note, the way these rules have been crafted from the beginning deals with public areas. And so that's the biggest challenge where essentially any state employee, most of us work in a non-public area based on all the definitions these were built around. So that's where we get at the problem where I'd be hesitant to say the public can bring guns into my office, but no employees can. So that's where we are today. I think the rules group thought that this moves the ball.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just add to that, for the record, you know, the auditor and I in this working group have been abundantly clear that we want to move forward with the Hirschler and office space buildings. And so the reason why we're here today is in no way, shape, or form weakening the rules or the same rules this board voted on. What we're trying to do is make sure that this is uniform for state employees based on the guidance we're receiving from the AG's office regarding that uniformity of private space, meeting space versus public space. I mean, is that an accurate, that's the distinction here that we're talking about, the private versus meeting space, private and meeting space versus public space. And those are different sets of rules. Do I have that correct?
Chairman and Superintendent, yes. The primary driving force behind that is ensuring that we don't inadvertently violate statutes, and that's where we need to ensure that we are looking at those office spaces appropriately. And for example, there are certain office spaces where Department of Corrections has offices in conjunction with other agencies. So a blanket rule covering all office spaces would make it less clear to the public that you can't take a firearm into a correctional facility, and that's statutory, and that would supersede any rule that we were to create. And so making sure that we don't create some confusion in the rules as we are moving towards expanding the rules to cover those private spaces and the office spaces, and just making sure that there isn't confusion for the public going into this process, and identifying clearly and specifically the boundaries that are in place statutorily, so that the rules don't make more confusion and inadvertently cause people to violate the law.
Mr. Chairman, follow up.
Let me have the superintendent and then the treasurer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And what is your, excuse me, what is your expected timeline with these to get back? I know that we just got the list of all the office buildings from A&I. What is the timeline for that? Because I think that while this process does avoid some of that confusion, there's still a little bit right now. And so I think we want to move as expeditiously as possible. And so could you give an idea of when that could be and how soon we could get that before this board?
Chairman, Madam Superintendent, I have already started drafting the blanket rule for the office spaces, and we have internally in the AG's office identified the office spaces from the list that A&I provided yesterday. These are office spaces where we will need to specifically meet with the personnel for those agencies to identify what spaces are going to be excluded from that blanket rule. So we already have a working draft that will be going through the review process internally before we send that out to the working group. And then we're working on identifying one of the other considerations that is somewhat complicated. There are multiple agencies that have law enforcement divisions, and identifying where those law enforcement divisions within a larger agency. So the brand inspectors are law enforcement officers, and so there's a prohibition on firearms in law enforcement offices. And so identifying where in that list from A&I are law enforcement offices and corrections offices, and the very limited mental institutions. So obviously no firearms in mental institutions. And so identifying where those spaces are out of that list that A&I provided.
And Mr. Chairman, just really quickly follow up, and that those are based on, per the direction of the auditor and I and our working group, for just for knowledge of the board, our direction was to move forward mirroring what last year's bill had included, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
And there are still some spaces identified with that HB 125 from last year that it wasn't a blanket repeal of all executive space or all of the prohibited areas. So there are still certain areas under HB 125 that would be prohibited, and we need to make sure those spaces are identified. So Department of Corrections, where their facilities are co-located with other offices, the Gaming Commission, the brand inspectors, those smaller and more specific law enforcement offices that would be exempt from the rules, and making sure that those are identified and not inadvertently included in a rule such that it is in conflict with statute.
Yes, Mr. Treasurer.
A follow-up on one of the comments that the auditor raised, and that was that there's different levels of security or perhaps different policies associated with the different offices and floors in the Hirschler building. And from my perspective, I think that those are best decisions best decided by the elected public official that has the purview of those buildings. And I think that's a place where I think we need to go. And the governor has purview of his office and all the other buildings, you know, as far as that goes. That's I think under his guidance. But I saw some creep into, I would guess, from the museum curating system on the photos, the pictures that hang on our walls, and that they're in total control in the rules as they're written now of everything that can hang on our walls. And frankly, I hope you guys saw the changes to the proposed rules that essentially says that the elected public officials, if they want to hang a picture of their ranch in their building or a picture of their hunting trip with their family in their office, they can do that. But right now, it's prohibited. Everything has to be approved by the museum curator. And that's a creep that I think that you guys need to start being aware of when you're drafting these rules, because each one of these public officials has a different level and has an idea what their office and working area wants, and has to be. And as far as there's certainly elected officials who are controversy from times to times arises, and I think we have to be more cognizant of what the public is capable of, especially in that assassination of a health, CEO. And so there are a lot of people who decide to take matters into their own hands. So if you have a particular, public elected official that is acted in a way that causes enough controversy for people to actually think that they could be in danger, they need to have the ability to make those decisions for their own offices. So when this goes forward, and I think in the future, that just bear that in mind, that every one of these elected officials have something different. I know our unclaimed properties, we've had, one or two incidents practically every year, somebody that says it's my money and I want it now, and so you just have to work through those things and be cognizant of the risk. And there's nobody more cognizant of that than the people that are on that floor every day. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Secretary.
Okay, I have a number of questions. One, does this rule apply to all individuals, employees of the state, all individuals, including employees of the state in the areas affected that are subject to the rule? Can an employee of the state in an area that is subject to the rule carry in that area?
So at this time, I do not believe that it applies to employees. And again, I will reiterate, I am as low on the totem pole in the AG's office as you can get. So the intent was that they, sorry, am I too far away?
No, you're fine. I was just saying Devin's here with you if you.
Oh, thank you.
And Tabitha, thank you very, very much.
Yes. So, and if you agree, he is slightly higher on the totem pole than I am in the AG's office.
But no less intelligent.
The intent was that the executive order would not be superseded by these rules, again, because it is more specific as opposed to a general rule. And there is a concept in legal drafting that the specific applies over a general rule. So this was intended to be a general rule in place with the executive order supplementing this rule until such time as the personnel rules were updated to cover employees.
And Tabitha, just to sort of allay any of the concern about where the executive order sits in regards to that, we are looking at drafting something to correspond with when these rules go into place, because as currently, it is my understanding that you can't carry by statute, into any government meeting. That would have to be fixed, number one. Number two, the executive order can only apply to employees of the state. And it's a fairly broad executive order applying to, efforts of intimidation, et cetera. It applies to explosives being brought in, knives, that sort of thing. And so we are looking at crafting something that comports and makes sense within the context of the rules as they apply, so that our employees are as well protected. The other thing I think that the treasurer has brought up is really good, is that each of the executive offices and presumably each of the agencies may want to weigh in a little bit on how affairs are conducted. It seems reasonable to me. And it also seems reasonable to me that a person would go about this the way we are. The biggest push on this is to be able, during session, to be able to bring firearms into the Capitol in the public spaces, and certainly that's an issue that the legislature has control over. We have the control over the public spaces. So just putting that in context.
Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was hoping that I might be able to clarify the personnel rules a little bit for Secretary Gray. A&I takes care of the personnel rules. The executive order is referenced in the personnel rule, and I think that's where part of the problem is. And so being on the working group, they have worked diligently to start working on getting those conflicts fixed. But as the AG Tabitha has said, it is a daunting task to try to get that done quickly, given all the different rules that are out there, the executive order and the statute. So I'm hoping that clarifies a little bit that the personnel rules do reference the executive order. And I would say that that's where some of the problems are.
And I have the auditor.
Mr. Chairman, and just a,
Yeah, I know you have follow-ups, but she's on
so, and just a little bit, maybe more of an answer to the secretary's question and my understanding, which again, I too am not an attorney. The first version of these rules, not the version we put out for comment, but the first version had, if you recall, had a provision specifically excluding employees from this. So it explicitly said, this does not include employees, meaning employees do not get to carry. We talked about that a lot and went back and forth, and we actually removed that with the intention, so knowing that employees are still covered by the EO when they're at work. However, our intent was, knowing that we're gonna pass a rule for office space, then we don't have to go back in and change this rule that covers the capital area. So we intentionally removed that exclusion. So I think in answer to the secretary's question, this, I think a state employee, can exercise this authority if we pass this rule, but only in public areas, because that is all where it applies. So, like in the extension, but just being a state employee does not in any way restrict you from utilizing what is in this rule. It's just then you can't go into private areas because this rule does not contemplate that at all. But yeah, that was our intent,
All
was
right,
to not have
bingo.
to tweak it again.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bingo, we got the answer to the first question. So and I believe that is correct, because an employee is an individual, and it says individuals lawfully engaging ... So my next question is about this sort of thing we've heard about private versus public areas. Where is that in the rule?
Private versus, okay, he's talking about the non-public spaces. I don't think there are private spaces. EE. On 1-4.
Which is page 14 of the packet.
Okay, so, I have a couple questions on this, Auditor Racinas. Because, you've asserted, there's been an assertion from the working group a couple times that, writing in the Hirschler is writing in certain agencies and not doing others, and somehow picking and choosing. And even though we've been sold this bill of goods, that this rule applies to the entire Capitol complex. So this line of questioning, I'm trying to understand a little bit more on how this is going to work.
And Mr. Secretary, just to point of clarification, I don't think it ever was sold as a bill of goods. I think it was always intended to be systematic in its approach, starting with the public areas and the Capitol, and then moving into the agency spaces. I think that's been clear from the beginning, so.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think this has been delayed over a year. It's not going to apply for the session. It's my opinion, so.
If this board is able to get this done in time, Tabitha, you can correct me, it could be in effect by the middle of February.
No.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the delaying factor would be LSO or management council's concurrence or approval. It could, if everyone gets on board and the approvals go through, it could be in place. So that's the minimum of 40 days that you have to wait unless, is it management council?
Yes, so typically, those familiar with the rules process, typically there is an LSO review, and then after that, so the statute, and I forget, I do believe it's around 40 days, but it says, I believe that it says that the governor but obviously not so much acting as chairman, but acting as governor, cannot sign a rule packet until either after the LSO rule review, well, management council, but management council doesn't do their approval until after LSO, but until the management council approval happens, or I believe 40 days, whichever of those happens first. However, during session, typically the legislature does not, LSO is too busy, they don't do the rule review, and I don't know if management council can get around to it, but because LSO doesn't do the rule review, that just doesn't happen. So during session, it's generally just the 40 days. And I believe it is 40 days.
You're telling me there's a chance.
Yes. So as long as the rules are passed today, they can be signed and into effect within, like I said, I believe it's 40 days. I'd have to have the statute to know the exact number of days, but once that is passed, they can be signed and immediately in effect.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, Madam Superintendent.
and then question on the rules that are currently being drafted. What is the, anticipated timeline for that? Is that something that we could have, a special SBC meeting to approve those, to get those out for public comment moving forward? Because I think that is true. I mean, these rules have always been in public areas of the Capitol and Capitol Extension. And so as we move to Herschel, we want to get public comment on that. And so what is the quickest, if we had a special SBC meeting to move forward on those, that we could get those going?
I believe the thing that's going to take the longest is meeting with the individual agencies to get their input on those areas that we need to accept out. So depending on that, and again, the superintendent and the auditor are on the working group, and so your schedules would come into play with meeting with those agencies if you wanted to be involved in that process, or if you wanted to delegate it, that might go faster, but it's going to largely depend on how long it takes to get that agency input. If we can expedite the agency input, yes, we could call a special meeting. I believe we meet quarterly, and again, this is my first year here, so we could have something in place by the next meeting, provided we get that agency input quickly. Otherwise, we might be looking at a couple more months, but yes, we could call a special meeting for the purpose of promulgating rules.
So thanks, Mr. Secretary.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when I asked this question of the auditor on the of where it said that it only applies to public areas, she referred me to the definition. But I'm not seeing yet in the thrust in section 5 where that definition is effectuated. It says in G, notwithstanding subsection 5F of this chapter, no dangerous weapon may be carried in the Capitol building and the Capitol extension except those lawfully carried, but nowhere does it refer to this definition of public area. So where does it do that?
It's in Romanet II, right under G. Individuals lawfully engaging in permitted carry or constitutional carry in public areas.
Okay. Your follow-up, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, in our briefing, we were told that there was a 75-day delay, I believe, but I may have heard that wrong. And so I'm trying to remember when we've done rulemakings that there would be a 75-day sort of enacting delay, but I'm not sure that is correct. I do think it's immediate once it's signed, but.
Yeah, so there is a 75-day thing in there, but what that is that is the longest. So once the rules are adopted, say you adopt today, the longest period of time that can elapse before the rules are signed is 75 days. If 76 days elapse before they are signed, then the whole process has to start over again. Typically, it does take about 75 days for rules to get signed, and generally speaking, it doesn't super matter. I mean, not saying that any rule packet isn't important, but it doesn't necessarily matter whether they're effective on the 40th day when technically the governor would have authority to sign them, or if he waits the 75 days, there's generally time and it doesn't really make any difference particularly. However, anytime the governor has the authority to sign them once either that management council review has happened and they don't have to approve or disapprove, review has to happen, or the 40 days has passed. anytime between once one of those two things has happened and the 75 days, the governor has authority to sign. Given that the governor is the chairman of the board of this commission, I think that, I can't speak for the governor, obviously, but most likely be able to do it quicker than that. But there is a 75-day limit in the rules, but it's not when the rules become effective or anything like that. It's just if more than that amount of time passes, and I have had that happen before, things get delayed, and then a rule packet, you have to restart the whole process. You have to go back out for notice and comment, re-adopt them. That whole thing has to happen again.
I've got a secretary has been saying I've been stopping his follow-up, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what is the
Come back to you.
earliest? Let's say we pass this today, management council met tomorrow. Could the governor sign them Friday?
I believe so. I would have to double check the statute. I believe the way that it is written is that either the management council, it's whichever of those things happens sooner, that after the management council does their review or the 40 days have passed. Like I said, I believe it's 40, it might be 45 or something, but whatever, but I believe it's in the 40s at least, that whichever of those things happens first, once that has happened, the governor can sign. So yes, I do believe so. I would have to double check the statute. I don't want to go too far out on a limb without rereading it, but that is my recollection of what it says. I wouldn't expect that that's super likely, because generally they wait till LSO, and given that the legislative session is happening as of next week, I don't think that they will do their review. They're typically, this is maybe a somewhat special circumstance, as they probably care about it more than other rule packets, but generally speaking, when we get this close to session, and particularly when session is start, they do not do their review, and they don't, I know I assume management council meets, but they don't meet for rule reviews during the session. There's too many other things going on, and LSO does not do rule reviews during session.
Yeah, and I think that would be superseded here just because of the importance of it and the timing. The issue is, as often happens in these situations, we got to communicate and the situation, because I'm not sure everyone's aware over there.
Is that a follow-up, Mr. Secretary?
No, it was, but I'm good for you to go over to the treasurer now. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Mr. Treasurer.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, when I was reading this through there, I had a question about security personnel. They're the other folks that are, can essentially act just like Division O if they're contracted. And from my reading of it is that anybody can contract anybody to provide security personnel, depending on I guess the authorization, and whether it was an agency, whether it was an LSO person, certainly the governor or other people can do that. But what's the qualifications of being a security personnel? I think somebody that was working at a fast food place could go down, apply for the job, get hired and be part of or you could do an LLC. You got a security company and you just hire anybody. I don't know. How's that work? Because I don't see it in here.
Madam Secretary, if you've got an opinion on this.
Mr. Chairman, as I learn more things about the universe, I think, assuming things is becoming less and less safe. But generally, I believe when a state agency, department, commission, board would contract for security personnel, there would be qualifications that are stipulated within that procurement for that contract. That would be an assumption. Unless somewhere in statute, it's defined somehow somewhere.
So I'm just
And Madam
wondering-
Secretary and Mr. Treasurer, just pardon me, I worry on some of this that we end up in a speculative area, and if we have somebody with some understanding of that here, that would be great if they'd raise their hand. If not, I think it probably, is worth trying to get that answer.
So, yeah, I just wondered if a new LLC called Acme Security showed up at the door, what's their
Coyote.
standard contract look like for security? It'd be interesting to know.
And I do think Director Bach will maybe give us some perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And when we hired SecOps, which is also in this building, there are very detailed requirements that are needed for them to carry. So there are contracts that we had for security that did not carry, and then we did have some that do carry, and they were different situations. So they are certified. I don't believe that they are post-certified, which is different, but they are certified to carry, and they go through the process of the certification to carry. If you have an agency that just contracts with Joe Schmo down the street, I would hope that that goes through the AG's office as well. So that's something that would be covered.
What certifying agency or organization does the certification?
I can get back to you on that, on what SecOps does. And
Appreciate that.
unless there is somebody in the room that knows more about that. But I can get that to you on what we required at the time and what they require, YDOT requires here.
Thanks. Further question, Madam Director or Secretary?
Mr. Chairman, one other thing I'd like to point out is that part of the goal of this first step to move the ball in concert with legislature was to make rules that are not confusing and that do not conflict with existing law. So on page 42, there's a memo that we provided to the Joint Judiciary Committee. Their interim topic number 3 was repealing gun-free zones. And so I do have a message that may indicate that Management Council has concurred. I haven't seen it with my own eyes, but that may have already happened. However, there's still one problematic thing that would make it confusing if this happened before item 1 on page 42, and that is Wyoming statute section 6-8-104T, IV and V prohibit carrying into any meeting of a governmental entity and any meeting of the legislature or a committee thereof. So if the rules were adopted today, they couldn't be signed, or it would not be in the best interest of making things straightforward and to sign them until those 2 items are repealed.
And Mr. Chairman, it is important to note that they would have been repealed in that bill that was vetoed by the governor in the 24th session. Thank you.
Fair enough. Thanks for that wonderful piece of information. Please go ahead, Auditor.
Mr. Chairman, I'm ready to make a motion if we're.
Yeah. Perfect.
I would move approval of the rules as put forward for public comment.
It's been moved and it's been seconded. Is there any further discussion?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, I do have a amendment.
Okay.
On G, I would like to add before and the Capitol extension, the Hirschler Building. So it would read, notwithstanding subsection 5F of this chapter, no dangerous weapon may be carried in the Capitol Building, the Hirschler Building, and the Capitol extension, ... And then the second part of the motion is to amend Romanet 2 to say all individuals lawfully engaging in permitted carry or constitutional carry in all areas, in compliance with all other ...
Thanks. The motion's been made for an amendment. Is there a second? Is there a second? Is there a second? Mr. Secretary, that motion fails for lack of a second. Further discussion? Hearing
I'd like
none,
to
all
make
in
a
favor?
couple.
I'm sorry, go
Thank
ahead.
you. Well, I'm going to go ahead and vote for this. I do think, you know, it might not be a 3-yard run up the middle. It might be a half-yard run up the middle, but go ahead and vote for this. I think that the bottom line is we've got to stop the dithering delay. And this bill that's coming through the legislature, I you know, have many times called for this repeal of these gun-free zones. And it's been vetoed. It was vetoed in the 2024 session. The provision that would have repealed this prohibition in government meetings was part of that veto. And so you have to wonder here, what's going on? I mean, we have an opportunity to repeal that, and it's vetoed, and then we're engaging in this parallel process that won't apply in most situations. And so what really has to happen here is we just need to have consistent action and not this sort of dither and delay approach. So I'm going to go ahead and vote for this. You know, I think it would have been good to apply it in all areas of the Capitol complex, which is the way this was sold. It wouldn't have just been for one agency. It would have been for all the agencies in the Capitol complex, which is what, when we originally started this rulemaking, is what we said that it was going to do, is going to apply to the Capitol complex in all the areas that we have jurisdiction over. Now it's been extended to, you know, probably 25% of that, if that. That being said, you know, a half yard is probably is better than a loss or stasis. And so I'm going to go ahead and vote for this, but I'm very excited about this upcoming legislative session. I think it's really important that we highlight these areas of inconsistency when we're trying to move the ball forward, and then you know, there's a veto or some other excuse made, and then some other parallel effort that can't move forward because that earlier effort didn't go through. And so I really look forward to continuing to work with the legislature in bringing this through consistently. And how, you know, and I think ultimately they can just keep passing this bill. I mean, even if it's vetoed in the middle of the session, just, you know, and we just have to keep working on it, because it's a very important issue, protecting our Second Amendment rights. You know, the other thing I want to push back a little on, and it was, you know, said earlier, I want to push back a little bit on what the treasurer said, you know, on within agencies and leaving it up to the agency's discretion. These gun-free zones are soft targets. And if somebody wants to do something, they're not going to check, you know, the rules on the website or call Secretary Norton to get them. I don't know where they are, where they'd find them, to see, hey, can I bring in a gun before I carry out the evil plot? I mean, that's not just the way it's going to go. It's the opposite. If they see that we are carrying in all places at all times, that's what is going to deter the criminal activity. And, you know, what has been said earlier is absolutely right, that it's very disturbing, some of the trends in our nation of this violence. And so the answer is for us to be able to exercise our constitutional rights, period. And I know in many ways the ethos that the media has tried to build up, that doesn't quite hit it there for some folks, but that's the reality. Is that's these soft targets are tremendously vulnerable. So I'm gonna go ahead and vote for this, but thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Treasurer.
Mr. Chairman, I was trying to be delicate about the situation of certain elected public officials that have a target on them. And that's not too Biden-esque, I hope, but the situation was not to allow elected public officials to create gun-free zones, but it was to allow you personally, Mr. Treasurer, Mr. Secretary, to actually have the security that you probably need. And so the basis for your assumption why I thought that the elected public officials should have some autonomy is because they should have some autonomy because they're elected public officials. And to give you the protection that you probably need in the office that you have because of the controversial, I guess, things that have occurred in your office tenure that have caused, I'm sure, some great angst and anxiety. So I was trying to remove that specter of someone else telling an elected public official what they can do or can't do for security. You totally misrepresented my motive on this. It was not to make gun-free zones. It was to protect you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Treasurer, Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I think that these rules are a good step in the right direction, and we are far from finished with the work, as has been articulated by the auditor and I. We have been pushing hard to move forward on this, so much so that there was even consideration that I was overstepping in my role on the working group. And so I want to be abundantly clear that we are moving forward on this. And if we could just snap our fingers tomorrow and remove all these gun-free zones, I would very much like that. That's where I want to head, in that direction. And I'm glad the legislature continues to look at this. We're trying to work through the complexities and get this done, but get it done right. And that's important. Instead of just making a blanket statement, trying to just snap your fingers and get this done, we want to make sure that it's right for our state employees, for our agencies. And so we will continue to move forward. And as soon as we get that done, even perhaps propose a special SBC meeting to get that rolling, because I very much want to continue this work. This is a step in the right direction, and we want to get it right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Call for the question, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and appreciate that. I want to make one thing clear, because I think Suzanne, Director Norton, or Secretary Norton, you mentioned that public comment might be appropriate, and it was my view we had a motion in flow. There was time for public comment. There have been 45 days, and so I'm going to dispense with that piece of it and go to the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays? That motion carries. Thank you again, Auditor and Superintendent, for work on a difficult topic, and I know it's not going to get any easier, so.
Mr. Chairman,
And Mr. Treasurer.
I move to approve the continuation of the efforts of the Rules Working Group to contemplate the unique circumstances in the state's array of agencies, boards, commissions, departments, and the state-owned facilities they occupy, and to draft rules in accordance with those efforts that could be reviewed at a future meeting of the State Building Commission.
It's been moved by the Treasurer, seconded by the Superintendent. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Discussion.
One thing I want to do really quick, I want to push back a little on what was said earlier by the treasurer. You know, this isn't about me or the elected officials solely. It's about everyone. It's about the public, protecting the public at large, protecting our agencies, the employees that work there, and everybody. And so I think it's very important as we move through this process that we emphasize this point. This is about protecting everyone.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Treasurer.
I don't necessarily disagree that it's about protecting everyone, but I think that everyone has to have that ability, especially the elected public officials, to be able to withstand an executive order by a governor that's contrary to the security needs of the people in your office and those people that visit your office. And I think that's the autonomy I think that every of the offices should enjoy. So that's my opinion. I think that's a reasonable thing to know that the folks have elected us to do our jobs, and we want to make sure we got a safe, secure place to do them.
Thank you. If there's nothing further, we can proceed. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you. Further discussion? If there is none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays? Thank you. Superintendent had me on a short leash. Good job, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. Thank you. Excuse me. Page
Thank you,
four.
Tabitha, thank you, Devin.
Page 47, we are on item 3 with the financial reports. Again, I'll reiterate that the SBC contingency account, when it was created with the intent of providing resources to the commission to continue your statutory duty to assist maintaining state facilities, as noted in items 1 through 4. The current balance is just under 18 million, but it is noteworthy that this commission and previous statute has 15.5 or 15 million of that obligated to other purposes. So that leaves us with a balance, a projected balance of 2.9 million. With the upcoming session and the capital construction request, if a replenishment is provided by the legislature, that will bring us back up to the $7.8 million in the SBC contingency, with a minimum of 7.45 available for property acquisition. The SBC flex appropriation language intent for this is generally to assist projects with unforeseen costs and cost overrun that may happen when a project takes a little bit longer and inflation comes to bear on a project. That balance is holding fairly steady at 11.9 million. In the last quarter, we have had 2 approved obligations for 2 projects from the state facility inflation reserve account, a little under $300,000 for a previously appropriated and authorized project for a state agency facility project, and $2 million was approved for a previously appropriated and authorized project for a community college project. There have been no expenditures from the cost escalation de-escalation from 2023 session law. And now, does anybody have any questions on those 2 updates?
Questions? Questions? All right,
Okay.
please.
Item 3, the portion that is an action item, please refer to the handout on your desk that provides a forward for consideration for a Department of Health facility. And I do hope that Director Johansson's able to, Mr. Miller is here online, but I'll start with a forward and then perhaps turn it over to Mr. Miller for specific Department of Health input. In coming to you with this request, it's been interesting to learn more about residences and employee housing that are part of the state's portfolio across agencies statewide. I've learned that within the agencies that receive major maintenance funding through the State Construction Department, there are 65 staff residences, and that includes corrections, Department of Health, Agriculture Department with the State Fair, and a couple of others. Across agencies that don't come to the SBC, the Wyoming Department of Transportation and Wyoming Game and Fish Department, there are a total of 225 residences that are provided for convenience and efficiency of operations for the departments, for their respective departments. It allows access to the facilities and maintenance, response to emergencies at times that are outside of regular business. And in most of these facilities, they're at 24/7 facilities. In addition to that, the Department of Health has additional comment and narrative that they provided here. And Nate, would you like to speak to Department of Health's, or would you like me to summarize? Director Johansson had a employee onboarding this morning.
I think Mr. Miller has.
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Suzanne. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Chairman, yeah, as far as the Department of Health, Nate Miller, construction manager for the Department of Health. In conjunction with what Suzanne was saying, we do offer housing for each facility's administrator at our 5 health facilities, with the exception of the Pioneer Home. But it does have a built-on apartment that has that capability. For the Veterans Home, we've offered that on-site residence there for, well, since it was built in 1940. And the house, I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with it. In the handout, we have some photos, but the house is in need of some repair, as well as the site that it's on. With the construction of the skilled nursing facility on one side of the house and the potential, the reconstruction of the domiciliary, we feel that the physical location of the administrator house isn't really ideal anymore, as it sits in the middle and the center of the campus now with the new construction that's gone on. So we feel that it would be prudent to continue to hold off on the major maintenance projects. This house, as stated in the handout, has quite a bit of maintenance that's been deferred, put off, and we feel that those dollars would be better off spent constructing a new administrator residence located adjacent to the facility, so it's not centrally located in the middle of the campus there. If you take a look at the handout, we have the facility condition assessment that was provided in 2015 that reported the building was in fair condition. However, it needed renovation, and that the department should consider renovation versus building replacement to assess that, to determine if renovation or replacement costs is most cost effective. So we broke down some numbers there and escalated them to today's percentages. And we're looking at the cost of renovation being about 49% of the cost of replacement value for this house. So those are the reasons why we feel that the money would be better off spent in putting into a new residence there at a different location. And so we would like to look at doing a most cost-effective remedy to compare the renovation versus new construction, and what our options could be for providing a new residence there.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I don't know if there's any questions. I understand the term deferred maintenance. Knowing that facility and knowing some of the people that have lived there, I want to make it clear that there were very few resources that were available to apply to that over a number of years. And, you know, it's amazing that that is in the condition it is, which is livable, but it is a structure that was built in 1940. So.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious whether there's been any analysis of the necessity of a house. You know, of course, things are much different than they were in 1940. I think maybe good to, you know, look at, do we have a standard of which, you know, when agencies have these housings that are available, is there a criteria for which those meets to be able to have those included in the facilities? And so wondering, I think I would only be comfortable moving forward with this most cost-effective remedy if it wasn't just renovation versus rebuilding, but also looking at is this necessary in today's time for this residence?
Director
Superintendent,
McCombie
yes,
and
thank-
then Mr. Miller back, Director McCombie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had the opportunity to visit with Mr. Jack Tarter. He was the director there, lived on site for decades. He told me when he first became employed at that site, it was a pretty small house. It really wasn't accessible down into the basement. In fact, he had a son that lived in the basement next to the boiler. And to get down to the basement, you actually had to go outside and come back in. At one point in time, they added on to the facility, to the building. They took the living room and made another bedroom in it because it didn't have enough bedrooms for all of the children. And so that was added on to. And then I talked to him about, what he saw as the director there for a long time. And he said it was not uncommon for him to have to fill in on last minute notice for when employees were gone, when there was emergencies with building repairs, those sort of things. He was right there and actually took on a lot of those roles at that point in time. So that discussion that I had with him kind of reiterated to me the need to have somebody there at that site. And perhaps Mr. Miller can weigh in on maybe the changes more recently on that. But he indicated it was really a 24/7, 365, just filling in many cases when a nurse wouldn't show up or something like that for whatever reason. He was the person that took over and filled in on that last minute notice.
Thank you. That would be where I was going to go to, Director McCombie. Mr. Miller, any further color on that?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I would just also mention that, all of our facilities are 24/7. And it's a feature that, has been utilized, for as long as I can remember. I've been with the department for 16 years, but I'm sure it's been utilized obviously a lot longer than that. But I know, speaking with the director, that it is a recruitment and retention tool as well, for these superintendents, and to get good professionals at these sites working. So if anyone has any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. And Superintendent, just a little bit of personal experience with the area. As you know, I lived there. And in the last, I would say, 40 years, that market has declined, and there's been lots of houses available, and then it's gone up. I can remember really in the beginning of the 1990s, there were no houses available. I think that's sort of one of those issues we face around the state now. Currently, they're seeing a tremendous amount of growth in the area, and so I think houses, I'm looking at Zillow now, it says the average home price is $394,165. Now, average refers to a number of houses, so I'm sure that there are houses that can be acquired for something less than that, but I just, as notes. And I would also note that that's a little bit remote, as you know, and it is sometimes hard to get there during storms and things like that. So, but I see Stefan has walked in, and he may have some other perspective beyond that. And the auditor, did you have okay, thanks.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Apologize for my tardiness, spinning a few plates this morning, but apologize for being late. I'm not sure how much you've already reviewed in the concept or proposal here for the Veterans Home Administrator Residence. I'll be very brief. Just in summary, going into maybe a little bit more detail, we have as many of you have seen, the current administrator residence. With the construction of the new nursing facility that opened a little more than a year ago, the current administrator residence sits right between, literally in the middle of between the nursing home and the assisted living facility, so very central on the campus, which isn't ideal, but it's something that we work with, and our administrator and his family are certainly happy there. In addition, when he moved in, again, about a year ago, we started planning for what we needed to do to that 1940s residence to not only make some necessary upgrades to the physical plant itself, but we also had some work done to look at site work that would need to be done. There's been water filtration in the basement, a couple of different issues impacting the foundation that would be more of a significant major maintenance project that we could move forward with. However, we thought it was prudent to bring to this body just a different consideration before we spent that kind of major maintenance dollars, in a consideration in conjunction with the potential rebuilding of the domiciliary, which this commission has recommended, which is a much larger capital construction project, to potentially look at constructing a new administrator residence on that campus, delocated from the central part of the campus so that we could use it for parking, other needs that we have, but also maybe save those major maintenance dollars for the current administrator residence and the site work that's needed, which is between $200,000 and $300,000 recommended. So I've put a hold on that site work or major maintenance project to the current administrator residence. Our administrator is happy, but if you see some of the pictures that I believe were shared, the basement right now is somewhat unusable, unlivable. Our administrator and his wife have 3 kids. We certainly want to make that a livable space as something we offered as part of the salary and benefit package with the administrator house there. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, happy to answer any additional questions. Understand that there's pros and cons to all of these options, but we did think it was prudent to not move forward with a large major maintenance project when there's a potential to maybe be a little bit more efficient long-term with the replacement cost of a house like that. Mr. Chairman, happy to answer any questions.
Thanks. So, Mr. Treasurer.
Yeah, so have you had anybody actually check out like there's a lot of acres out there, I'm sure, to build a house, but are they all, have you got some good building sites so we know we don't have to worry about drainage problems or something else? I mean, just wondering whether you had to do some soil analysis in the new construction, so I'm sure you probably got some data that you can rely on.
Mr. Chairman, Treasurer Meyer, it's a good question. Just to clarify, this would really authorize us to move forward with studying those types of things, collecting that information. However, you're absolutely right. We believe that there are other locations on the property that would be more ideal for a house. I do have Nate Miller on Zoom, who's our Department of Health Construction Manager, and can speak to some of the initial estimates that we've collected, both in terms of cost to build, cost to renovate, et cetera, some of which we provided in your materials. But essentially this, as I understand it, would approve the department and state construction to look into that feasibility and reconnaissance of what would be most efficient with these dollars. And I'll just mention again that it's a little bit awkward with this body and with the legislature because, as you know, we have a potential request for starting the domiciliary reconstruction, which the legislature will weigh this upcoming session. And again, at scale with that kind of project, I think there's some leveraging that could be done to incorporate something like not only the study for the administrator residence, potential administrator residence, but incorporating it into a larger project.
Mr. Chairman?
Please follow up.
I guess I just hate doing studies that you just blow money that could be used in construction. $58,000 to study it. You come back here in a year or two, and the price has gone up another $50,000 or $60,000. So you're gonna blow $150,000 by waiting. That's just maybe 150 is too high, but I'm sure it would probably be another 100,000 the way things go up. I just soon make a recommendation, Mr. Chairman, to go ahead and proceed with the construction with the state, I guess with the contingency funds. From my perspective, we do too many things that's like government and not like business, you know, so I'll make the motion whether or not it flies.
Actually, let's hold up a little
Okay.
bit on
All right,
that, just so we
okay.
have a little bit more. Auditor,
Mr. Chairman, I agree wholeheartedly with that sentiment, but if I remember correctly, aren't by statute, they required to go through 1 and 2, or help? Because I see the point.
Madam Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, one of the first conversations we had during the briefings was like, well, this is a house. Is it really capital construction? But if we are requesting capital investment, we do need to do level 1 and 2. We do believe that we could approach this with the most cost-effective remedy process. With your authorization, we would make sure all of the boxes that are notated in statute for level 1 and 2 are also accomplished, or getting to a certain point, and the beginning stages would be the, what do we know, what don't we know in order to move forward? Is this really essential? I mean, I believe it's essential to have someone there 24/7, from the research I've done so far and from Director Johansson's testimony. But I think we would accomplish that.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Miller, I didn't know if you had any additional comment, and then I want to ask the director a question. So, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any further comments this time. Thanks.
So Director Johansson, it's interesting to me that having seen that place over the years, ever since I was a kid, it's notably different in its operation today than it was, say, even a decade ago. Not just the advent of the new facility, but a lot of other aspects to it as well. So I just wanted to get your perspective, on the kind of the superintendent's point about the proximity of the director being there.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. It's a good one. So you're right. The campus has changed a lot, especially in the past couple of years, but our census at the domiciliary, which is assisted living care, runs about 60 or 70. Our census at the nursing home right now is about 18 or 19, and it's 24/7 care. So we have rules and regulations with our nursing staff, our clinical staff to be there covering care, emergencies, et cetera, 24/7. I do think there's a benefit, and there has been a benefit on numerous Department of Health facilities. The nursing home in Basin is another good example where our administrator lives in the old house there on site. Just over the holidays, we had fire suppression system go down, and that requires, manual observation. And with the skeleton staff during the holidays, it's tough to cover. Having the administrator there is a huge asset. Having said that, I know Buffalo is in close proximity, but we've done some work to look at comparables within Buffalo. As you mentioned, the housing market is pretty challenging in some of these places in Wyoming. But going back to your original question, it's been very valuable for us, especially with our new administrator who we hired about a year ago, to be on site, to be eyes on when we have emergencies, when we have resident deaths, which unfortunately we have, given the population there and their age, to be able to triage and act quickly, call staff in, but be able to document things on site, both for the regulatory perspective with the state and the federal government, and just for continuity of care with those residents. In addition, we do have, as you know, Mr. Chairman, significant staffing issues with direct care. And so it is not uncommon for our administrators to take night shifts to fill those gaps when we need them, when we have staff out sick or staff that resign. It's an unfortunate reality that we have at all of our 24/7 facilities, but something that I do think an on-site administrator presence, which we don't have at all of the Department of Health facilities, but 3 out of the 5 has been a huge asset.
Thank you. Further questions? If not, if there is a motion to be made.
I would move the director's recommendations that to I guess it says to, moving forward, a cost-effective remedy to construct. I'm not gonna put the or renovate. I don't wanna spend money on a 1941 wreck. Superintendent residents of SBC contingencies funds. And then, I guess, further move that the contingencies funds an amount not to exceed $58,000 for the WVH superintendent's residence, which shall not be expended if the domiciliary construction moves forward, but be incorporated within that budget.
You understand the intent, Madam Secretary?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, we understand the intent.
Yeah, we're gonna, if you're gonna have the engineers on site, you should be able to not have to spend the whole 58,000. That's what we're getting at.
Mr. Chairman, understood.
Very good. Is there support for the motion?
Mr. Chairman? Just
Madam
question,
Superintendent.
clarification, and that's contingent on action by the legislature on the greater complex? is it?
All these things are.
Yeah.
We don't spend any money or appropriate it. Yeah, it's just a recommendation that this moves forward. But if the other thing moves forward, then the money for the studies that have to occur should be able to be done with a lot less money, if they're put together.
So for point of clarification, just for my edification, and I'm hoping this is where you were superintendent, the residence probably needs some work. It does. I mean, there needs to be a replacement. If the intent of your question was, if the legislature moves forward with a domiciliary, then we'll try to leverage to make sure we keep the most efficient cost structure in place to do that. But I didn't know if what your question was if the legislature doesn't move forward on the domiciliary, would this die?
Mr. Chairman, that is my question for the maker of the motion.
I think it survives but the 58,000, if the domiciliary moves forward, then this study, is incorporated within that, so we can get a little better bang for the buck on the engineering work.
Fair enough? Clear?
Mr. Chairman, I understand.
Madam Auditor?
Oh, I was just going to second
Oh,
his motion,
okay. You're second.
if it hadn't been done.
It hadn't.
Mr. Chairman? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just question then on this, on the Mercer study, if we move forward, just to humor me, does that include looking at, I mean, I hear all the explanations of why it exists, that sort of thing. I think it's just good for us, even though we've had it forever, to always look at whether or not it's still necessary. And so was that part of the study as well?
Mr. Chairman, Superintendent, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. All right. Further discussion, further questions? If there are none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays? No. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, next item is item 4, which will be brief. The attachment on page 50 is the permit and event applications, which are pretty standard in this report. And then also updating you to let you know that we will be kicking off the 2025 facility planning efforts with all of our agencies here in the next few weeks.
Thank you. Questions, comments? No?
Mr. Chairman, item 5 on page 51 is the Capital National Historic Landmark nomination update. I happened to see on the news has picked this up with a press release by the State Historic Preservation Office. Ultimately, we had a number of scholars studying our building and grounds, and the project we just finished, a few things that could be updated and made more consistent with our building's National Historic Landmark status for its place in the nation's history. And The updated documents were accepted to enhance the recognition of this property as an irreplaceable part of our nation's history. And so those attachments are there through page 55.
Thank you. Good work.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, item 6 is the Capital Interpretive Exhibit and Wayfinding Subcommittee update, which I will ask Auditor Ursinus to address.
Mr. Chairman, you do have the narrative update in your packet. There's been a lot of physical movement, as you can see, since our last meeting. One of the most visible ones, of course, is these lovely photos in this room, which make the room distinctly less beige than it was previously. And if you all haven't had the chance, the public meeting rooms down this hallway, again, those are each featuring one of the 6 main drainage basins of the state, sort of in rough geographical order. And those all have photography from that area of the state. We've received enormous feedback that folks are just loving them. New legislators coming in, taking a look at them. They're way, way cool. And I'm not sure if they're unlocked or if A&I can unlock those rooms for us to take if anybody wants to take a cruise through those. If you have not seen those, just really big impact. The rest of the project continues to go well. Most of the panels are up in both those public meeting rooms and the Capitol. We're in a little bit of a funny spot right now because legislative appointments to that committee, we will have a lapse where we don't have any legislative appointments. So we are anxiously awaiting new appointments or reappointments from legislative leadership. I haven't heard back on that yet. I think typically that's done after session. We have sort of asked, begged, pleaded, if there's any way we can get those appointments sooner so that we can continue doing work during this time period.
Great. Madam Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, I have one more comment that comes to mind, going back to the fall of 2007 when I joined construction management and going to some of my first legislative meetings, including Select Committee on Legislative Facilities with Senator Mockler and Representative Illoway chairing. And I understand even way before that, there has always been, how do we put artwork in this building? How can we put artwork in our spaces? How can we do this? Well, it took 16 years to get an appropriation for that to come to fruition. And so, legislature wanted the enhancement of the spaces and now it's coming to fruition, which is nice.
That is very nice. Very good.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you,
Madam
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Secretary.
Couple questions. I think I brought this up at the briefing. Do we have a number yet on how much has been expended?
Mr. Chairman, 2.5 million has been expended.
Now, Mr. Chairman, do we have like an itemized receipt? I'm really curious, like I see the mural on the wall. I want to know how much it costs. I want to see, I'm really curious how much each of these things cost. Like, how do we get an itemized receipt of what the cost is on each thing?
Mr. Chairman, Secretary Gray, we do receive detailed pay applications monthly that we review and confirm that things are installed to our satisfaction before paying for them. We are allowed to inquire about, as much detail as we want in the contract, but I don't believe we have that information at our fingertips and we'll need to request it.
Mr. Chairman, how does payment work? Is there like an itemized receipt? Do they say, well, moving these costs this much? The mural on the first floor of the Herschler costs this much. There's a huge mural. Like when I walk out of my office, on the left, there's a mural. I really want to know how much it costs because I'm very curious. And is there a way to find that out?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know, great question, Secretary Gray. I don't know that I'm going to provide any more clarity than Suzanne, because it was an all-in price contract that was, and so backing into their detail, what they would charge us for one thing or the back end, I'm sure we can request it. The cool thing about those murals, those are actually called, it's FCO, but I'm struggling to remember what that acronym means. I apologize. That's actually one of the, in addition to the pictures, highest impact, lowest cost part of the project. So those wall applications are actually a really relatively affordable way to add a lot of punch, as opposed to some of the physical pieces you've seen are going to be the more expensive ones. So not the answer you were looking for, but
Well, Mr. Chairman, that's why I'm very curious and, on pricing in 2025 and, I see something in the hallway, I'm like, how much does this cost? Like, because I try to do government the way I live my life and like I, know what everything costs in my house, and so I'm just really, really curious. So that's one thing. The other thing is I've gotten a lot of comments on the prominence. As you enter the Capitol, there's this huge circle, and then there's a firearm, and then there's this X through it. It's very anti-gun. And a lot of people have asked me, well, we're actually getting our Second Amendment rights. We're working to actually have these in these areas, and now we have this really prominent thing on the door. It's a huge circle and a firearm, and then an X through it. And it just sends a really, I also hope that, I assume there's a huge cost to take that down because everyone here has said we're actually trying to move the ball, even though I think it's been remarkably slow on addressing this and protecting our Second Amendment rights in these buildings. So I'm a little curious on that decision.
yeah. Mr. Chairman, great question. So what we had previously was the sort of big, ugly, in the way stanchions that said no guns allowed. If you recall those, they were placed in the middle of everywhere, and I think there was some signage on the outside of the doors too. The original project proposal from the contractor was to put those in tooled bronze like the rest of the Capitol. We said, absolutely not. We want them cheap and easy to remove. So those are about, I think they're 4 by 4 inches that are up now. And they were not expensive, recognizing that they would probably be temporary, and there's little to no cost to remove them. And please correct me if I'm wrong, Suzanne.
Mr. Chairman, Auditor, I believe I could remove them myself in about 5 minutes, so no, it won't be a problem. A glass scraper. So,
It's not a sticker, I don't think. I think it's gonna.
It is.
It's a, okay. Okay. Oh, wow.
We thought about this, I promise.
I need to really put on my microscope. Looked like more than a sticker. It's not a great message. It's very prominent. And, the other one I want to make sure on is the, I really believe in making sure we have audio, visual, the icon with the ear and the spear going through it, is that universal? Because I asked like 5 people, what does that mean? And I didn't, a lot of people didn't know. So I just want to make sure for those that are, what the spear through the ear, is there another way of like making that clear what we're trying to effectuate there? Because it is important.
Mr. Chairman, again, Suzanne, jump in if I say something wrong, but that's actually universal required signage. And I apologize, I don't know the proper, but one of it is for T-coil. So again, if you are hearing impaired, you're gonna know if that symbol applies to you, you're gonna know it. Is that
Mr. Chairman, I concur.
yeah.
Okay.
It's similar to like the standard, ADA signage.
Okay. Yeah, I just learning and I just want to make sure we're using the icon that everyone that applies to would affect on that one. So, okay.
Mr. Treasurer.
When we finally do get our Herschler building and things, I've got a signage that I can share with everybody. It's a yellow sign like this. It's and an inside of it, it says this office protected by a high-speed wireless device with a Glock right in the middle. So we'll get you one of those, Secretary, so you can put on your door.
Very good.
Well, signage is, one of the gifts the staff got me a gift for Christmas. It's a huge sign. It says, "Election integrity is more than just an attestation." So.
All right.
For it.
Mr. Chairman, item 7 is our capital construction and major maintenance project updates, which you have in front of you. And Mr. Webb.
Mr. Webb.
Mr. Chairman, Dave Webb, State Construction Department, Construction Management Supervisor. We'll be going through item 7, the capital construction major maintenance and projects update. Starts on page 57. Tab A is the major maintenance summary sheets. The takeaway from this sheet is that in the first 2 quarters of FY '25, the State Construction Department has expensed $13,115,581 in major maintenance funds. That's doubled from the previous year.
And Mr. Webb, when you brought that to my attention yesterday, the obvious question I asked was why?
Mr. Chairman, I think it's due to we had the 20 through 22 reprieve on major maintenance. And so that's been lifted and we're just getting into the role of getting back into projects.
And we are, I mean, these are decisions we've made over the last several years to defer or lower our efforts to be able to address major maintenance. Major maintenance has this nasty habit of showing up later on very expensively. So this is.
It turns into deferred maintenance.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
So continuing on page 59. We'll go through some of the capital construction and major maintenance projects. Department of Family Services. We have the Stolt Hall Administration Education Building Level 3 in construction. They're about 95% done with design. They've hired a construction manager at risk, and construction is scheduled to begin early spring. Wyoming Boys School Maintenance Storage Building. The start is expected February of 2025 and hopefully completed by September. WLRC Emerson project. They're completed with the remodel, but they're replacing the heating system, and it's anticipated to be complete by this next spring. Department of Administration and Information, 4th floor renovation of Hathaway Building. They're expected to be completed with that project in July of 2025. Riverton State Office Building. The Riverton State Office Building is, we're holding interviews for construction managers at risk tomorrow. Hopefully getting that project in the way soon. Wyoming Department of Health Skilled Nursing Facility. That project's complete and they're working on the grant closeout. Veterans Home Remodel. The design is complete and the CMAR has been selected. It's on hold due to the federal funds or the state providing those funds. Wyoming State Hospital roof replacement in Evanston. Project's complete. asphalt replacement at the Wyoming State Hospital. The project has an expected completion date of June 30, 2025. Wyoming Life Resource Center campus fencing. That project is expected to be complete May 31st of 2025. Wyoming Life Resource Aquatic Center envelope and pool repairs. The interviews for the design team will be conducted January 15th of 2025.
So, Mr. Webb, that's coming up right away.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, it is.
And, you know, obviously having wandered around that with you all, I'm encouraged that we have good solutions in place.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sure we will.
Okay, good.
Wyoming Retirement Center, the next one is Wyoming Retirement Center, nursing residence, electrical services and basin. Their expected completion date on that is June 30th, 2025. The next three projects are complete. Fetch and Foam Laundry Facility, estimated completion is July 8th of 2025. Fire Academy Training Access, that project is complete. Wyoming Law Enforcement Academy, security upgrades, the project is complete. Interior reconfiguration. Yeah, the interior reconfiguration, and that's the pots and the laundry facility. That project's in design and will go out for bid in spring. Construction will go out for bid in the spring of 2025. The dorm remodel is currently under construction. Office of State Lands and Investments, Forestry Division. Hella Base, the project's in design and will go out for construction bids in the spring of 2025. Field office boiler replacement, Newcastle. They expect work to begin in the spring of 2025. Wyoming State Fair, the Dairy Barn Level 1 and Level 2 is underway and completion mid-2025. State Fair Master Plan update will be completed shortly after the State Fair. Fort Laramie Dormitory roof replacement anticipated to be complete summer of 2025. And that is prior to the State Fair. State Fair maintenance projects are the same. Community colleges, Central Wyoming College, Jackson Outreach Project. 100% design, project is scheduled to be completed in the spring of 2026. Northwest College Student Center, project is complete. Northwest College Orendorf Building capital renewal. The architect and construction manager at risk interviews are January 14th. Western Wyoming Community College Health Science Facility. The project is scheduled to be completed in the summer of 2025. Laramie County Community College rack renovation. The project is scheduled to be completed by the end of, and that says December 2024, but we're thinking January 2025. Laramie County Community College exterior facade renewal, phase 1 of that project is scheduled to be completed late spring of 2025. State Capitol acoustic project. And we're refining the scope. And we have received the design team's change order request for that project. Page 71 through, what is that? 87 is the Wyoming Community College District's major maintenance report. Mr. Chairman, any questions on that section?
Are there any questions on the community college? Hearing none, we can move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tab B is Department of Corrections. And we have Mr. Martin and Director Shannon, if there's any questions for Department of Corrections.
Mr. Treasurer.
Yeah, I was just flipping through the community colleges there. I wanted to see a summary of the total costs and available monies and all of that, but it wasn't summarized. I hope you can just get your spreadsheet to put, you know, a summary at the bottom of page 87, so we know kind of what we have here. I see you got 21 through 25, but yeah, some way to summarize some of that stuff, you know, so we can just get the cliff notes, basically, summary page on it.
Mr. Chairman, Treasurer, in response to that question, we will request that kind of reporting from the colleges. Those funds are dispersed quarterly directly to the colleges. So we'll update our reporting mechanism.
Yeah, it'd just is a nice number to have just to figure out what the scope of the thing is. Thank you.
Very good. Questions for Department of Corrections? Are there any? Director Shannon, it's good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Mr. Chairman, continuing on, item C is State Parks. We have Mr. Denise in the audience, if there's any questions.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, just one, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, please, Mr. Treasurer.
I know a lot of this is special revenue, and we've, you know, I guess freed up a lot of funds that you guys can use your own money on. Are those special revenues keeping up with the actual needs, and is everything moving on, you know, with a fairly good pace?
Mr. Chairman, good morning. Con Denise, Construction Engineering Manager for State Parks and Coastal Resources. Mr. Treasurer, great question. Yeah, our revenues are starting to pick up based on our visitation. You know, we had a spike in 2021 because of COVID. It went down a bit, so our revenue slowed down, but I think folks are getting back out now. Our construction needs are based on our master plans that we do. And so we spread those 20-year master plans out to basically allocate our 5-year average, 3-year average to those projects. So as of right now, we're on point.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Mason. Any other questions? Thanks. Please proceed. Mr. Webb.
Mr. Chairman, item D, Wyoming Military Department. Mr. Schultz.
Mr. Shope online. Mr. Shope. Let's get a hold of Doug. Obviously, we can't do it now, but we'll talk to Doug about.
Mr. Chairman, item E is University of Wyoming Capital Facility Report.
We have
Mr.
Mr.
Mai.
I think. Mr. Mai online.
Ms. Coates.
Mr. Chairman, sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chairman, I was having trouble getting this thing to let me into the meeting. Mr. Chairman, our part of this packet begins with the capital construction report, beginning on page 106. And then it follows up with our major maintenance report, I guess, beginning on page 115. And you'll see that that is the 2025 major maintenance planned expenditures. And I'm assuming that rather than take up your time with this, if you have any specific questions, maybe I can answer those, or if you want me to summarize any of this, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Treasurer.
Yeah, do you have a page in here that just is related to expenditures of federal mineral royalties, and how they're obligated for either major maintenance or backstopping loans, or the reason I'm bringing it up is because I think you need to get ready for that, because I've heard that there's going to be some people that want to mess with the FMR distribution. So I guess you better be prepared to defend that, I think.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I believe that all federal mineral royalties are now committed to the bond issue. And if you'll remember, a few years ago, there were some adjustments made to the FMR distributions to UW for that purpose.
Yeah. I think it buys down the interest rates, if I recall, because it's they're backstop.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. We'll just be ready, I guess. Forewarned, forearmed.
Will do, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Mai, as I was, and I'm going to refer you to page 112, 8 of 9 of your presentation. As I was walking through, and as you know, this has been an area of some concern to me. This has to do with the roundabout. And I'm unable to go back and look at past notes, but is it really going to cost $9 million? And it really did feel to me that this board, and some of you may remember whether we approved that or not, but it did not feel that we were in any way interested in trying to take care of Laramie streets.
Mr. Chairman, very good questions. And that project, pardon me, actually includes much more than just roundabouts. So it's all of the surrounding landscaping for the dorm project itself. Remember, there's that Union Lawn that's south of the South Dorm. There is pretty major access renovation that had to be done to accommodate deliveries and like trash pickup and that sort of thing over on the north and east sides of those. That all partly factored into how we address those roundabouts on 15th Street. In addition to just placing the roundabouts there on 15th Street, that portion of 15th Street between Willett and Ivinson Avenue, that is going to get narrowed down to one lane each direction. So the intent was to unify the east and west portions of the campus. make it more pedestrian friendly, make it safer for crossing 15th Street, whether vehicular or pedestrian crossing. So you'll see 15th Street ultimately will be narrowed down. There will be a median in there. And those were all changes that we at UW requested. The city accommodated us in our overall plan. But to answer your question directly, that is not all for, in fact, less than half of it, or maybe right at half of it, is for the 15th Street component itself.
And well, thank you for that, Mr. Mai. Two points on that. One, and that's where I was going to try to go back. It appears to me this has escalated in cost substantially over the last few months.
Mr. Chairman, it's the way that we are accounting for the project. So we're trying to assign the project dollars appropriately now. What you've seen in the past has, sorry about that. What you've seen in the past has been a sort of a general housing budget as we've worked out the details on that Union Lawn and then on the various access components, both east and west, on the east and west sides of those buildings, and then the Lewis Street component. All of that was actually contained in that housing budget, and now we're kind of moving it out to identify it separately, so that it's not new money. It's still part of the same project. It's just being shown for clarity's sake here.
Okay, thank you. And you know, I guess are there plans for the city of Laramie to abandon that street to the university at some point so that that becomes part of the property of the university?
Well, Mr. Chairman, there were discussions about that probably a decade or more ago. I do not believe that the city of Laramie has any intent to abandon that property to UW. I don't see how that fits into their plans, and so that's why we have been working cooperatively with them to try to come up with a solution that fits the university's needs and still fits the needs of the city.
Okay. Well, those are good questions.
You know, I'm asking the chairman here. I thought he was, you know, he's going down this line of, how does landscaping cost 9 million? Like, what's the, do we have an itemized receipt on what the inflows are on that?
So, Mr. Chairman, this is a budget right now. We do not have the final actual guaranteed maximum price contracts on these, but characterizing it as landscaping is underselling really what's going on. All the hardscapes, everything on the east and west side is included in this budget. So we're completely changing the traffic, particularly on the west side of the project, trying to minimize vehicular traffic through that area to make it more pedestrian friendly, going from those dorms to the Union and to Half Acre Gym. That's all going to be narrowed down in there. There's significant amount of money involved in retaining walls. I can show you the whole plan. I'd be happy to send you the overall landscaping and traffic plan that has been approved by trustees, and that give you an idea of the scope. We also have it posted out on UW's website too. So
Yeah, my email is chuck.gray, gray@yo.gov. And if there's a way to get an itemized thing, like, you know, start at 0, this is gonna cost $1.5 million, this costs $2 million, you know, how you get to 9 million, that would be helpful.
we can do that, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Chairman, just to follow up.
Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mai, so did the city cost share at all with this, being it, that it's their street, or was it fully funded by, the university, the state?
Mr. Chairman, it essentially was fully funded by the university through that housing project. The only thing that the city has contributed on this has to do with some of the utilities that underlie those areas that they requested to be modernized.
Madam Secretary, if you could provide maybe some perspective. I mean, it's been a while since we looked at this, but I thought we had been very specific about not taking care of streets, that this was meant for the other parts of this, but not for roundabouts.
Mr. Chairman, I do believe there was a different roundabout at another location that came before us that was not considered because of that reason. Not understanding completely the bond component of this housing and how that works, perhaps that's a little bit different. And then I would also say that from what VP Mai describes there, using the term landscaping isn't exactly all encompassing, because it sounds like there's a lot of site work and structural modifications that are being made. And I know that their contractor would have a schedule of values that explains that. And I'm sure there are designs and specifications that would help us understand it a little bit better. And we can get up close to consider that a little bit more. I would also speculate that perhaps much of this budget number that's on here right now is not just the street. It's on UW property. And maybe Mr. Mai could confirm or elaborate on that a little bit.
Mr. Chairman, the vast majority of it is UW property.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Mr. Treasurer.
One other thing, our favorite multi-decade project, Corbett Pool, or I don't know, is that called the Aquatic Center now?
It is, Mr. Chairman.
I'm looking at page 117, and it's still in the planning phase. When's the last time you got an appropriation for this? Was that 2 years ago? And I thought it was a lot more than 5 million, and is that money still available to do it, or has it been spent someplace else?
Mr. Chairman, can you direct me to what you're looking at on?
I'm looking at 2025 major maintenance, and I'm thinking this is you, I don't know, it's page 117.
It's the last page, Mr. Mai, of the major maintenance report, I believe.
Yeah.
The first section of it anyway.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. Sorry for the confusion here. That $5.5 million is actually related to the infrastructure changes that have to do with the item that is shown. Let me get you to on page 112. Page 112 is actually the UW Aquatic Center project. It is underway. We have a GMP, we have signed contracts, all of that is going. And if you go over to the corner of 22nd and Willett, if you are in Laramie for a ball game or something, you will see that site work is underway. They're putting in the drilled piers. That building is being constructed. So the new aquatic center is being constructed. This $5.5 million on major maintenance has to do with the existing infrastructure, fiber optic lines and hot and chilled water and all of that, those modifications that have to be made as a result of that construction work. So that's what you're seeing in that $5.5 million.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
It would be nice to have I guess a single report on that aquatic center and, you know, from the last time of the last appropriation, because I know when you were still working for LSO that we took some, I think, some AML money and did a switch and we're supposedly, I think we funded it and not when you were at the university, but they used it for something else and then it's come back a couple of reiterations. I just want to make sure that we keep track of it, and if you could break that out so that we know that there's no games being played again at some point in time when you have something that's essentially more important to you and you use that money for anything other than that.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the question, and there were multiple appropriations for various fixes at Corbett, and I will get you all of those appropriations over the years and where they are and what the current status is on those.
Thanks a lot. I sure do appreciate that because, you know, it's a great report, but if you got to go back through and take things out that's not associated with one single building, it's hard to track it all. But I sure do appreciate that. Thank you very much, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Ma. Any questions on major maintenance? Thank you, Mr. Ma. And
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Thank you. Madam Secretary.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, item 8 is an update from the Department of Administration and Information. Director Bach and Administrator Coleman here.
Good morning. My name is Patricia Bach. I'm the Director of A&I. I'm going to turn most of this, as usual, over to Administrator Coleman, but seems like every time I'm up here lately, I have good news. So I wanted to let everybody know Lori Gallus, which is not good news, is retiring for the second time. She is going to be at home with a grandbaby, her first grandbaby. So we knew that coming up. I knew that when she hired on, that's when she would leave. If that happened, it happened to happen. So we will be sad to see her go. But I wanted to introduce you to Chrissy Madden, who is going to be, if you can stand up, Chrissy. She's taking Lori's place. She has been on the job for about a week, and it'll be double filled so that she's able to fill some big shoes over there. So I just wanted to introduce you to her as the elected officials. You guys are the ones that see her the most probably, and Secretary Gray, I think you're probably one of the most that being right next door to your office building or your office. So there you go, Chrissy Madden. Thank you.
Welcome, Chrissy. Nice to have you on board.
And now I'll turn it over to Andrew Coleman. Thank you.
Mr. Coleman.
Mr. Chairman, Andrew Coleman, General Services Division Administrator. We also had another staff member who's here that's joined our leasing and space management team, Justin Roberts. Just joined us as of the 6th.
Welcome, Justin.
We have the report in front of you. I don't have a whole lot I was going to highlight, so mostly just available for questions. I did want to note the Department of Health has been moved into the Rogers building. We are underway for construction and the Hathaway renovation, as was mentioned earlier, with the anticipation of July 25th or 2025 completion. We're also continuing to work busily on the various real estate projects that we've been talking with you about over the last several months. As of last week, the very end of last week, we own the 200 West 17th Street building hosting the DEQ offices. That is now state-owned. We closed on that. We also have closings planned on some property land up in Riverton that should happen, I think, within the next 2 weeks. If there's any questions on those, I'm happy to take those.
Questions? All right, thanks.
Last piece I wanted to highlight was we've also been working on making sure to catch up on major maintenance projects with the recent hiring of Mr. Schrickling as our construction project manager. He's worked well with Todd McPhee, our supervisor for trades, as well, our manager for trades management, as well as our other supervisors in that department, and they've identified about $20 million of projects or major maintenance that are significant kind of priority projects that we are working out on rolling out on this year. Those are not the only projects we've identified, but those were the primary critical ones to to take first. They include, for instance, kind of a bundled project to address several fire panel and fire system upgrades that are needed in various buildings. We're looking at upgrading. A lot of elevators have, as I'm sure you've all known, going through state buildings, are kind of out of date and need upgraded or replacement. That's another, bundled project that we're working on. So we're working to maximize our efficiency by bundling similar projects, and we'll be continuing to work on those and excited to get those underway. I think it'll be a huge benefit to the A&I buildings. And that was, I think, the last main thing I wanted to highlight.
Thank you. Questions? Mr. Treasurer.
Boy, I think we'd really be interested in that double filling aspect of it. So if you could, I guess, give us any information about when we have an employee that we know is leaving, how we could, approach that same way to do it, because that sounds like a great opportunity to make sure that employees know what they're up to.
Chairman, Treasurer Meyer, we recommend highly that if you can, to double fill, at least for a month. A lot of times an agency can use vacancy savings for that. So they've had somebody who hasn't been in another position. It's usually quite easy to do. So if you have that issue, please give me a call and I can walk you through that. I would highly recommend it. And we had to do that with Lori. As you know, Lori knows everything. And it's a big shoes to fill. So that's why we have about a month and a half, maybe a little more, with Chrissy and Lori working together. Yep. Yes, definitely give me a call.
Well, and on that note, I'm sure being a young grandbaby, they take a nap from time to time. So Chrissy, you can feel free to. Very good. Any other questions? If there are none, Madam Secretary?
Mr. Chairman, the next item is item 9 for a proposed executive session. At our last meeting, we mentioned that we'd come back with additional information after a fairly extensive briefing in executive session on potential legal considerations and confidential legal advice. And we are happy to provide an update. We don't believe we will be ready to move forward with the next steps no costs until potentially the July meeting. But if we would like to go ahead and have an update on where we're at, we'd recommend an executive session.
Pleasure of the board on that matter. Madam Moderator.
Mr. Chairman, I felt like I got enough information for now from my briefing, but if a different member feels strongly, I'm happy to go either way.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think my big thing is, just continuing to move the ball on this situation. We can't dither and delay. We have to take action and continue to be updated. And, I know I was really seeking from our briefing, when we could reasonably consider action to have been taken. And, it seems like we're looking at somewhere towards the end of the first quarter of 2025, beginning of second quarter. So my one big concern is just, I would request that this be on the agenda, the second, or at least in the briefing, and then we can evaluate the agenda. But I prefer for it to be on the agenda because we just can't let these things go on forever. I mean, at some point we have to take some action because there's just been too many instances. I mean, the money flowing out the door on these projects, $9 million on this, landscaping roundabout surrounding, thing in Laramie. I mean, it's astounding number of dollars on these projects. And when we continually don't have follow through from these entities doing the construction, we've just got to get accountability, or it's never going to end. Because if, there'll be this idea out there that the state isn't going to protect its interests for its citizens when there's a problem on the back end. So it's very important to me. I think that, I think probably the briefing was adequate, but we just got to make sure we do more than half-yard increments here in the next meeting, that we get here to the finish line on scoring a touchdown on this.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Treasurer, any? No. Oh, okay. I'll take that briefings were adequate, so an executive session is not necessary at this point.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Chairman, page 158 has space for public comments, commission comments, and mentions the next 2025 meetings.
Right, with that, I will entertain any public comment. If there's anyone here who would like to provide comment, please feel free to step forward. I'll turn to Corey to see if there's anyone online. We don't have anyone? Well, thank you. No, yeah, all right, thank you. All right, Madam Secretary, I think you said that it's now time for commission comments. If there are commissioners who wish to make a comment, now's a great time. Senator Pappas, you've been so kind.
I'm fine too, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. If there is nothing else, the meeting dates are set. You have them April 9th.
One question.
Yes, Mr. Secretary.
I've gotten quite a few questions, Madam Secretary, on live streaming these meetings. SLIB does it, SBLC does it, and this is like, the legislature's doing it. Like, this is one of the few meetings of electeds that I've been involved in. I've done executive and legislature where it's not live streamed. I know you're recording it, but it's not live streamed, I don't think. So what are some of the obstacles to getting there on a live stream on these?
Mr. Chairman, it is live streamed. So
Where?
So we include it in our press releases,
Okay.
and it is on our website. There's a State Building Commission page for this commission that has a link to join the meeting online to view it.
Right. Mr. Chairman, I should have been a little more specific, right? Because then the meeting ends and it's done, and I know you have the recording and you can send that out via public records request or whatever, but when it's on YouTube, when you live stream on YouTube, it's there forever. It's not only live streamed, but then it's archived, right? And that's the way the legislature does it, the way the state loan and investment board does it, State Board of Land Commissioners. Have you guys thought on that at all, from a transparency perspective?
Mr. Chairman, it does seem to be, especially, since COVID and the implementation of all the technology that we've put in our facilities, that we should certainly be able to do that. I would say one thing in this room, it is not programmed in the same way that all of the other meeting rooms are, to be able to zoom in on the mics that are active at the moment. That's what the legislature does, which makes it especially helpful. And we could consider doing that, but there is a cost. But we'll certainly consider it.
Yeah, and I've gotten comments on that too, but I'm not asking on that specific thing. I think if we could get an alignment on state, I think that would be good.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thanks. Is there anything more to come before this board today?
Mr. Chairman, from our perspective.
Thank you, commissioners, liaison,
We can adjourn.
staff, for a productive meeting. It's been moved to adjourn. It's been seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. We are adjourned. Yeah, yeah, no kidding. Oh, my God.